We came back to Boston to track down more of the players in the story of the Columbia expedition. So we hit the State House. Heading down into the sub-basement. Tucked away in this far corner is the Massachusetts State Library's Special Collections Department.
So I got my pen and paper to write my love out for you. Then my little love song started taking...
There's little found on Samuel Brown, a member of the syndicate that financed this first American voyage around the world. Here, they brought out the original bound copies of the Columbian Sentinel, a newspaper for post-revolutionary Boston. In the edition for the day just before Columbia sailed from Boston, we found an article about the voyage and the medal struck to commemorate it. That's our Columbia and Washington medal. Nothing specific about any of the owners, though, so we headed upstairs. Here, in the oldest part of the building, we found a plaque dedicated to its designer, Charles Bulfinch.
Yeah, he designed this building, which is going to be a source of a lot of information for us.
I'm not trying to write a symphony, 'cause you know that shit just ain't me.
2 decades before he built the State House in Boston, 11-year-old Charles Bulfinch watched the Battle of Bunker Hill from his house in British-occupied Boston. It was the summer of 1775. It was a city under siege.
Pen runs out of ink. Maybe I could show you something more infinite, like the sound of the ocean.
Charles Bulfinch was born into a privileged family. His family was pretty well known in Boston society circles. He went to Boston Latin School. He graduated from Boston Latin School like most boys at the time because it was an all-boys school, and he ended up at Harvard University, or Harvard College at the time. And from there he ended up in Europe and did the grand tour in Europe where he learned a lot about architecture and met up with people like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin.
And that was following the Revolution.
That was following the Revolution, yes.
And when he was there, especially hanging out with his new friend Thomas Jefferson, would have been kind of like a patron, really. That's where he picked up this idea that John Ledyard was talking about, go out to the Pacific. So the house that he grew up in, Bowdoin Square, that was his father's house?
Family house, yep.
That's right. His father was Thomas Bulfinch, and he was a doctor.
Correct.
Okay. What was the neighborhood like?
The West End was actually out of the downtown area, which would have been done in around Faneuil Hall and Washington Street, and it was considered a little bit on the outskirts, but it was a fairly well-to-do area of town. Bulfinch watched the Battle of Bunker Hill from his rooftop. You would have been able to see Charlestown, Breeds Hill, and Bunker Hill from where Bulfinch lived in Bowdoin Square.
So he was kind of like a young teenager at the time that all this action was going down. I mean, basically, you're talking about someone who's living in, I hate to say it, the suburbs. Father's a doctor, and he gets to send off to Europe to be able to study architecture. Yeah, he's got a pretty comfortable life,
Very comfortable.
And he brings this idea back to his old boss of his, Joseph Burrell. They set up a syndicate, basically, to organize the Columbia expedition out of that house in Bowdoin Square, which is just up the corner.
Correct. He built this house first in 1798, and then while they were building the State House, and then from here he moved up to the top of Beacon Hill, and he was one of the Mount Vernon proprietors and developed all of Beacon Hill.
So when you're talking about Boston, Revolutionary War, post-Revolutionary War, the Federalist period on, you're really talking about a ton of buildings that were designed by Bulfinch, whether it's talking about the Otis Gray house here, or whether you're talking about the front of the State House. So he actually brought back two things from that grand tour. One was this story of how you could make money in a global trade. The other thing that he brought back was this style that he incorporated using some influences when his travels in Italy and travels in England as well, and kind of integrated them into the Federalist style here and influenced so many more. If he hadn't brought this idea back of the China trade, then he wouldn't have had these clients who later on made a lot of money with the with the China trade to pay for architects to design their own houses.
Right. It was a very interesting period in the history of the United States.
So when Bulfinch comes back from Europe in January of 1787 and brings Burrell this great idea of John Ledyard's of round-the-world money-making, Burrell sees an opportunity. Gathering at the Bowdoin Square home of Dr. Thomas Bulfinch, other merchants, other people with skills that can be brought to bear to make this happen, a syndicate starts to form with Joseph Burrell at the head.
Said you wanted me to write a love song for you. Well, I tried, I promised, but there's just too much content. Maybe I could show you.